I like the concept in your book. You call it the ultimate empowering thought. What's that?
So I talk about how life is very overwhelming because we're all taught like I should be able to do this thing perfectly on the first time, but I can't, so I'm a failure. And I call that the ultimate overwhelming thought. It's kind of the thought that we sort of naturally create in ourselves, even if no one's trying to put it on us. And so I was thinking, well, what's the truth then? If I don't need to be overwhelmed, if I can get help, what should I be thinking, to get that way? And I designed the ultimate empowering thought, which is I can try this thing as many times as I want with as much help as I can find until I find a way to meet my need.
Hello, and welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Woody Rini is a life coach who specializes in getting people the resources they need to live a meaningful and peaceful life. Woody has spent 6 years making therapy appointments, hiring life coaches, and reading every self-help book he could find. He's been determined to escape his own sense of feeling overwhelmed. As a result of his research, Woody learned that the key to a peaceful and meaningful life is simple: get more help from others. Woody now coaches clients on how to engage their support systems and how to ask for help when they need it. Woody has just released his book on overcoming overwhelm, titled Help, I'm Overwhelmed, a 4-step method for escaping life's rip currents and living a peaceful and meaningful life. All right. Well, very excited to welcome our guest, Woody. Welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast.
Thanks for having me, David. I really appreciate it.
Woody has just released a book. It's called Help, I'm Overwhelmed, a 4-step method for escaping life's rip currents and living a peaceful and meaningful life. I'm excited for the release of your book.
Yeah, I'm excited to share about it. It's definitely been a journey writing it. So I'm just glad to be into the sharing portion and kind of get it out into the world, because even writing a book can be overwhelming. So I learned some of my own techniques while I was writing it.
All right. And Woody is a fellow introvert. Of course, the book is for introverts and extroverts. But Woody, before we get into your book, just tell us a little bit about yourself. And again, definitely the introversion part is part of your journey. Tell us about being an introvert and finding yourself overwhelmed and working through that to writing this book.
Yeah, sure. So I think my introversion really hit when I entered the workforce. And by hit, I became aware, like, I need to know about this and understand the difference between introversion and extroversion. Because in, middle school, high school, I was an introvert, but I am sort of a sociable introvert. And so I was able to find time at home and recharge. And then in college, being an introvert kind of helped in some ways because I was good at school and good at sitting and studying on my own and using my skills. And I always had a dorm room to myself that I could go back to. But then I went to the corporate workplace and I worked as a computer programmer. Again, pretty good job for introverts, I would think. But I was in this huge open office area. And that's the first thing that kind of started pinging my radar as an introvert is it feels really odd to be working in a room with 40 other people and I can hear all their phone conversations going on. I can, they're all reaching over to talk to me or grab something. And it was kind of chaotic. And I realized, wow, I'm not getting the space for myself I need. And I'm feeling overwhelmed. And it wasn't just the, physical aspect. It was getting work emails all the time, from different people and lots of little details flying around. And it just felt very chaotic. And I also found that I wasn't super happy at the job I was in. And so I got to this point, and I detail this at the very beginning of the book, but I got to a point where I was like, wow, I'm not in the career I want. And I followed the rules, gone to school, gotten good grades, but I don't know, what to do with myself now. Do I change careers? Do I go back to school? What do I do? And I found the best way to cope at first was just to find a little space to myself and do a little meditation or do little personality tests. Took a personality test. It said, hey, you're a INFJ. You're good at, certain things. You're bad at being a corporate worker or a corporate employee, when I did the Myers-Briggs inventory. And so I just realized, hey, I need to deliberately think about who I am and what my life would be like ideally, instead of just following the path society gave me. And so that's kind of the genesis of this book, I guess, is just thinking about all that and having to take a conscious effort to be less overwhelmed. And that's what got me thinking about it all in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what it is. It's like, what do I need? Where are my strengths? You mentioned right at the beginning, when you were in college, you had your own room, which I wish I would have had. So the first year I didn't, and I couldn't have labeled it what was going on back then. But, I managed to get my own room after that because it was really important just to have, like you said, we're sociable, right? But it was important to have that space. And to be in a room with 40 other people, why do we do that? And most people, I mean, we need a little space to work. We need a little focus. Why are our workplaces set up like that? It's pretty crazy. That's definitely another show right there. So
yeah, absolutely. You can bring another specialist on for that topic. That's a deep topic.
Yeah. So how did you start to become less overwhelmed? How did you get over that?
Yeah.
What did that take?
Yeah, it took, at the core, and this is what the book is about, is it took a willingness to ask for help. Basically, I've realized I was overwhelmed. This is like late 2016. I'm, a year and a half out of college. And suddenly after a year and a half of work, I'm like, my body can't handle this. I need to adjust and become less overwhelmed. And so started taking the personality test, taking some space. But then I realized I did need to apply for a new job. And there happened to be a workplace that was really good in my area that also gave an office to every employee. So we talk about that. And this is a really unique company that actually did have an office for every employee. And I thought, wow, I can work at this great company and have my own, separate space. And so I applied there, didn't get in, applied there, didn't get in. And then about, a year into the process in like 2017-ish, late 2017, I realized I can't just treat this like school. I've got to ask for help from people. I can't do it on my own. And so I just started asking friends and family if they knew anyone who worked here. Did they know the hiring manager who was hiring at this company? And my friend, who I just walked my dog with in my apartment, was like, this is a 10,000 person company, but I know your hiring manager personally, and I can give your resume to him. And so I just got lucky to get in there and ended up succeeding at the interview and getting the job. But I noticed, oh, this was not just like school where I just do my work and everything works out perfectly if I do my side. It's like, I've got to go out and ask for help. And as an introvert, that was really scary, right? But it helped me move forward. And so did that. And then at the new job, I signed up for therapy. And again, it was just kind of luck in hindsight that my physician who was on campus at the job said, hey, Woody, you're fine, but you do probably have anxiety and you would benefit from therapy. And she gave me this pamphlet and handed it to me and was like, you get 4 free therapy sessions through our mutual employer if you choose to go with their employee assistance program. And so I started going to therapy. That's maybe 2018, and then little by little, I just kept asking for more help when the opportunity came. So the therapist recommended consider medication. I considered it with a psychiatrist and went on that. And it just sort of snowballed from there where I was asking for more and more help. And then eventually I ended up quitting my corporate job to do more life coaching and more advocating for mental health and joined some peer support groups. And it's just been sort of an organic matter of feeling overwhelmed and thinking, who can help me with this? How can I get support, but in a structured way? Kind of as an introvert, I like the structure. I like structured conversation. And so really it's as simple as getting more help from others, but not accepting the overwhelm and just kind of trying to change something with help.
Yeah, that's a great story. You found the right person. And then that also led to some great resources too. Let's back up just a little bit. In your book, you talk about some of the causes of overwhelm. Definitely maybe in school and then in life, you get one shot at this being perfect. Another thing you mentioned, being available all the time. There's that expectation. What are these expectations that can give us overwhelm?
Yeah. I'm amazed when I look back at how how many things in society just kind of naturally make us overwhelmed. And I started with school when I was thinking back on this, because I realized that in school, there's always a standard of perfection, at least in my schooling, there was, which is 100 out of 100, and you could take a test and you try to get 100 out of 100. And I realized that when I was in school, I was so focused on that because I thought, like you said, and like I say in the book, I got one shot at perfection. So in school, if I take a test and I get a 60 out of 100, that's an F. And I may not have a chance to retake that, depending on the grading scale, but that could have serious implications for my grades, for my future. And so I sort of, not that anybody told me, my parents were very calm and supportive, and I always got great grades. So it's not like anyone was pressuring me, but just by nature of school being designed to get these grades and shoot for perfection, I was sort of conditioned, and I still feel this way, and I'm working on it in therapy, to try and be perfect and always focus on the flaws. So then when I went to college and I got a 96 on a test, which is an amazing grade, right? I should be so happy with that. But all I would think is, oh, what 2 questions did I miss? What 3 questions did I miss? I forgot to study that one worksheet, and I did all this, but didn't study this one worksheet. So I got a worse grade. And so I think even though I was succeeding, I was so scared of imminent failure because school, gave me the option to think about that. And also because there was no standard of what's good enough. Like, even if I'm great at undergraduate, what if I want to go to grad school? Then I need a perfect GRE and a perfect this and that. And, even PhD students and professors have to compete for tenure and for grants. And, school, it's not anyone's fault. I think teachers and educators are absolutely like some of the best people on the planet, but I think because of modernized society, we have to have some of these systems. And so I think rather than say, oh, all education is bad, it's terrible, education's obviously great, right? And really important. We just need to be aware of some of the side effects. And I think overwhelm is a big side effect of the modern education system.
Yeah. And I mean, definitely there's some great work going on out there, really looking at what is the goal here and what's the best way to achieve it. And I think, as I was reading about the, kind of one shot, I think that spills over into our lives and our work lives, because honestly, some of the best learning comes from when something doesn't go well. You figure out, oh, okay, this part didn't go well, but I learned something, and now this is going to be even better. This project I'm working on or this thing that I'm doing, we learn so much from our failures. As I study successful people, they all have big failures in their lives, and that's something to remember. But a lot of times, just like school, people don't have a lot of tolerance from learning from failures.
Right.
And that's definitely overwhelming in our work lives too.
Totally agree at work, because it's scary to let someone fail. It's scary to watch and not want to intervene. And so even our teachers or our bosses or people, they want us to get things right. It's not even just selfish. It's that, it takes kind of emotional intelligence and skill to fail. I think we need to learn that,
Yeah, for sure. And then what about, what's this expectation of being available all the time? I definitely have had a hard time with that myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think this was already really happening since I kind of just generically market, and I'm pretty young, but I call it the smartphone era, because I just say that by the time you've got, a computer that's extremely strong in your own hand that you carry everywhere, you're always able to be available. And so I noticed that even if I just had to answer one email at night for work or consider one thing, it was just so accessible that it was hard to justify not doing it. I say in the book, like, what if you're trying to get a promotion and your boss says, hey, can you do this one email for me at 8 p.m. on a Friday night? It's just going to take you 5 minutes, and you're out at dinner or something with your family. It's like, well, am I really going to say no? I mean, I just have to take my phone out and I just have to, click a couple buttons, and they're waiting on me. And another thing with being in a big work system, if you work at a bigger institution, is that, people are waiting on you for something. There's kind of people work passes through. And so I think it's just, again, it's an expectation, but it's so hard to have a boundary. I think it's not so much just working more or more often, but it's hard to find the boundary, and just determining your boundaries is very stressful. And, maybe that's an introvert skill we can, use is our ability to kind of step back and set boundaries and think more abstractly about things, rather than just kind of doing whatever comes in front of us. And that's something I try to do and help me write this book. But it's just there. And COVID has made it, of course, even more in the forefront of everyone's mind, working from home, having technology access at home.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. It's a skill that we have as far as being able to be reflective, but we have to give ourselves some space to do that. We have to give ourselves some time to think about that. So how does someone work through that? If they're feeling overwhelmed, how do they pinpoint what's causing it?
Yeah. So I think this is a good chance to kind of segue into the solution I offer, the HELP method. It's an acronym, HELP, because I thought about this and I've thought about it a lot. How do we know? And I think the answer is it's not so much that we can know exactly what's causing the most overwhelm for us. It's that if we feel overwhelmed, and, I think we all have our own definition of that, but it's that feeling of kind of resentment at like, oh, life is too much, like that, oh, I can't handle this. I just need a break. I just need some space, or maybe it's just a physical sensation. When we have that, we need to seek help to figure out what's going on. And so I've been thinking about this, and I think I try to make medical analogies, kind of like comparing mental health to physical health to show it's really all the same thing, just as legitimate. And I think it's like if you have a fever, you don't necessarily analyze every single thing about your own self and try to figure out why you have it. You go to the doctor and they say, hey, I'm going to run a couple tests, or I'm going to give you some medicine, and you seek help to understand what's happening. And so if you may not have a fever, but you may feel anxious or depressed or just panicked. And so I think it's important to go to a friend or to a therapist or a support group or someone who can help you. And so the way I deal with that and what's outlined in the book is something I call the HELP method. And it stands for halt the panic. The first thing you do is just halt your panic, then engage your emotions, look for help, and then kind of patiently float along or parallel swim. And I have these floating and swimming metaphors in here because my main metaphor or analogy, I don't know what it is in the book, is that life is like a rip current in the ocean. It's like these tides, they're technically currents that if you're at the beach, they can pull you out into the ocean. And sometimes these rip currents that are pulling people away from the beach actually go faster than people can swim. And so what happens is we end up, fighting against life, and these swimmers end up fighting against this current, but they can't outswim the current. Some of these rip currents go faster than an Olympic swimmer. And so I think life's the same way. Sometimes school, work, it's too overwhelming and we can't fight it head on. And so instead we do what these swimmers in a rip current do. We halt our panic. We don't fight against it. Then we engage our emotions instead of just drowning them or giving up, just like a swimmer might give up and drown. And then we actually just wave and yell for help. The way swimmers are rescued in the ocean, it's all because a lifeguard saves them primarily. And while we're waiting for help, we just kind of float along and sort of swim a little to the side out of that current until someone can rescue us. And so that's kind of a brief version of how I kind of start feeling overwhelmed, and then the steps I noticed I was taking and have kind of formulated into this method for how to be less overwhelmed.
Very good. I'm glad you brought up the kind of theme in your book about the rip current, because that may come up again. So
yeah.
I like the concept in your book. You call it the ultimate empowering thought. What's that?
So I talk about how life is very overwhelming because we're all taught like I should be able to do this thing perfectly on the first time, but I can't, so I'm a failure. And I call that the ultimate overwhelming thought. It's kind of the thought that we sort of naturally create in ourselves, even if no one's trying to put it on us. And so I was thinking, well, what's the truth then? If I don't need to be overwhelmed, if I can get help, what should I be thinking, to get that way? And I designed the ultimate empowering thought, which is I can try this thing as many times as I want with as much help as I can find until I find a way to meet my need. And I think a good example of this is how I changed jobs to that great new job a few years ago with its own office. And that was just a big leap for me. Was I tried interviewing at this company 3 different times, and the first 2 didn't even get a response. And then the third time I said, okay, I'm going to keep trying. And how can I get help? Well, I'll ask friends, family. And I just ended up asking a friend at my apartment who worked there, and she had the connection I needed to, get my resume seen. And I was able to meet my need of having a new job in my own office. And so I think the thing that's really crucial about empowering ourselves is school and work often teach us we need to do things right. And I know the listeners can't see me doing my air quotes here, but
Right.
there's air quotes around the right, because there's really no reason to get something right except that you're trying to meet a need, right? Like it's just a signpost towards accomplishing something. I want to build my house right so that it doesn't crash in on me and kill me. And my need is to stay alive, and so in school, often there's assignments we try to get right, but it's not directly tied to a human need or to a specific end goal. And so I think that's where things get tricky. And so the empowering thought is I can basically do whatever I can, as long as I'm not hurting others, to try and meet my need. And that's the ultimate empowering thought.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really good thing to view, because in this example, you tried to get a job at this same company and you weren't successful at first, but you kept at it. And you probably were learning all along the way. And then you all got help, as you said. And I think that that's really important. I've seen a lot of people where they probably, wanted that particular job and they didn't get an interview, or maybe they got an interview and they bombed the interview. But I've seen people where they treated that as a learning experience and then were successful later. And I've seen people that just gave up. And of course, they didn't ever get the job if you give up. So I really like that concept that, I'm going to learn from this and keep going and not let this overwhelm me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just to be clear, I always try to, show the struggle. That's one of my values, like show the struggle. I first interviewed at that ideal company in 2015, straight out of college. And I actually flunked a second phone interview, just answered the question about programming wrong. And the guy was like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry, You're not getting the job, like a direct rejection. And it took 2.5 years from that point to the point where I actually got the job at that company. And, 3 applications to that company and probably 30 or 40 applications to all over the place. So like you said, it takes a lot of failures to end up succeeding.
Yeah. And I mean, that definitely can be overwhelming, getting a direct rejection, as you said.
Yeah.
Something like that you're really, you went to school for, you're ready to do. But again, you just got to remember, you got to keep going and you will have success. So how do we set boundaries and cut out some optional things that are overwhelming to us?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a little section in the book at the end that's like, even as hard as we try, a lot of the time we just have too much going on and we've got to set some boundaries and I call it, cutting weight, because I'm using that rip current metaphor of like, if you're out in the ocean drowning, for example, when a ship is sinking, right, what do? You throw all the crates off the ship, right? Or whatever, so that it doesn't sink as fast. And we kind of need to do the same with ourselves to keep ourselves afloat. And I noticed that I kept wanting to, cut down on social activities or certain things I felt obligated to go to. But when I didn't understand just how overwhelmed I was as a result of school or work or what have you, I thought I was a bad person for, cutting down on activities. I thought I would disappoint others or hurt them, or, in some ways I was ashamed of being an introvert and thought I should be able to go out and socialize like all these other people. And, like I just have to pretend I'm an extrovert. And once I, did some of the personality tests and realized, wow, I have some great skills and some great talents. And it's okay if I need some different things than extroverts. There are plenty of other introverts in the world. I got to cut some things out. And so what I decided is I would make a list of optional tasks I was doing, which were things that if I quit them, nobody else would be directly harmed, So for example, if I chose to quit, like, I don't know, going to my job all of a sudden out of the blue, my wife might be harmed because our finances would be in jeopardy. But if I quit going to dinner parties that we were going to, my wife wouldn't be harmed by that. She might be alone at the dinner party, or she might choose to not go if I wasn't going, but I wasn't harming her. I wasn't actively doing anything to harm. And I think, we all get so many expectations put on us in life and it becomes very stressful that it's important to sort out what's really harming others and what is taking space for ourselves. And so what I do now is I look at the thing that's the most optional, but also the most overwhelming to me. And I just use dinner parties as an example, because these social parties, right? I'm an introvert who likes deep conversations like we're having now. And I'm at a dinner party with, again, 30 people, and it's all this small talk and chaos. And I don't really know them that well. And I'm trying to get deeper, but I can't. And, I left always feeling unsatisfied because like I just knew my personality wasn't getting what it needed. And yet it was just a casual thing. And so I knew I could quit that. And so I recommend, when you feel like, oh my goodness, I just can't keep going, find the most overwhelming optional thing. You don't have to blow up at somebody or quit everything that's important to you, but just find something that's optional and try to reduce that a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And, find out what you need. And like you said, if this particular thing is not getting you to the deep conversations that you really need and want, maybe there's a better way to do that. But just to try to meet other people's expectations and it's overwhelming you, that's a good example of something that you may be able to cut out. And, maybe there's sometimes if it's really your wife's thing, maybe it's something you do need to do for her, but, work through that. And I know lots of people that have, and you got to figure that out. You mentioned your strengths as an introvert. You found those by taking the personality test. What's a strength that you have as an introvert?
Yeah, I think for me, it was so funny because one of my first coping skills at work in my big open office was I would go to the one little single office they had that was kind of free use where people could take turns in it. And I would close the door and I started Googling like personality tests and, did one of them online, and it said, hey, according to Myers-Briggs, you're an INFJ. And it gave me a profile, and it literally said, you're great at helping people and emotional intelligence and deep thinking. You will not be great at a detail-oriented corporate job. And that was literally what I was working at, and so that cracked me up, but it just showed me how little I had thought about my own personality, even in college, choosing my major, and so now I've learned that I am really good at abstract thinking. And that's really valuable for noticing counterintuitive patterns in life. So my book is about how life is best handled when you don't confront the biggest things head on by yourself, but instead ask for help and kind of circle around the side of it. And it doesn't mean you ignore things. It just means that you take a realistic view if you're overwhelmed and you literally can't defeat something head on, some huge stressor. And so my abstract thinking helps me see that, because I say in the book, if you're getting pulled out to the ocean in a rip current, your first instinct is to swim back to the shore, right? Like if my goal is to be alive on the shore, I should swim back towards that. And the same way at work, if my instinct is, oh, this person sent another email, let me reply perfectly so that they're pleased and so that they're not mad at me anymore. But instead of that, maybe I needed to take a break and take some time for myself and even apply for a new job, But if I'm stuck in that loop of just responding to emails, handling the immediate stress, I may never have applied. And so I think as introverts, and definitely for my type of introversion, I have the ability to notice that and say, hey, let's take a step back and think from a higher level. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, for sure. In INFJ, it's the intuitive part combined with your introversion that it makes you definitely see the big picture. And you probably can do details because obviously you did, if you were a computer programmer, but doing that all of the time is not going to be your strength. I was going to do the same kind of work. I didn't get as far. I changed majors, but I realized that I'm very good at details, but to do that all of the time isn't my strength. I have a different strength, and that's the key to all this. So when you're getting help, in the book, you also talk about an umbrella person. So what is that, and how do you find your umbrella person?
Yeah, I really love this idea. And it's so funny because most of the ideas in this book sort of came backwards to me. It's not that I invented them. It's that I kind of did it on accident. And I was like, oh, hey, that really worked. Because the book was originally, I rewrote it a few times. And the book was originally supposed to be just how to trick yourself into not worrying. But that didn't work for me. Just telling myself not to worry, somehow it didn't work. And so I actually wrote a draft like that. And then I couldn't get my own book to work on myself. So I had to kind of redraft. But anyway, to really answer your question, An umbrella person is a person who keeps you safe and keeps a safe space for you while you engage other helpers in your life. So the point of my book is you can't do it alone. And sometimes you just get trapped between the effort of asking for help and the logistics of actually getting the help. So when I needed therapy, right, I had anxiety issues my whole life, but I worked for multiple years in my corporate job, super anxious without getting therapy because, yeah, I wanted it. But man, the hoops to jump through to sign up for therapy was like, research it, pay, get the insurance right, do a questionnaire, make sure my insurance is working. And I needed someone to help me with all of that. The therapist office couldn't do that. And so what happened to me is just by luck, my physician at my second job actually handed me that pamphlet, right? Like I told you. And she said, here's what you do to sign up. Here's exactly where you go. Here is, your first 4 sessions free. Just go sign up for therapy. And it's very easy through our program. And so an umbrella person is like what my physician was for me, someone who's safe and trusted that you're already around, who then helps you sign up for the thing that meets your need that's more complex. And so I say, we should all have these people who the umbrella comes from the analogy or story that, let's say you're driving across town and your friend's dropping you off at your parents' house or at, a colleague or someone else's house, and you've got all this luggage and it's raining outside and you're carrying your luggage in, but you don't have a hand for your umbrella. And so you just need your friend to get out of the car with the umbrella, hold it over you both, drop you at the door where you're going, and then they just go back, get in their car and leave. And you've arrived dry and safe at the place you are going. And so I think similarly, we all need someone to keep us, metaphorically dry and safe, but physically, safe and supported while we sign up for, it's not just therapy. It could be, a career coaching program. It could be applying to a new graduate school. It could be anything you need that you're too scared to sign up for or to take the first steps. We need someone to support us while we do that.
Definitely. And so maybe this person might help us. How do we find the mental health resources that we need?
Yeah. So I definitely recommend finding an umbrella person, a person who will help you look things up. I know that it's just easier with a team of 2. And the great thing about this is that you can be mutual friends with someone, So for example, my wife, Preetha, and I, we're kind of umbrella people for each other. So if she says, hey, I'm trying to eat healthier, can you find me some healthy meal services or some healthy cooking options? I say, yeah, I can do that and help you figure out what will work for you. And if I say, hey, I need help with my therapy or my insurance or these logistics, she'll help me. But also, I do put a lot in the book itself about what mental health resources are out there. And so I'd just like to briefly say, it's not just counseling. There are also a lot of great peer support groups out there. And so I recommend people when they are saying, hey, I'm overwhelmed, even with help, therapy can take months to get signed up for. And it is cost prohibitive in some ways, although I list some ways to make it cheaper in the book. But there are peer support groups out there of people who are all facing the same challenge who often talk for free. And so I go to one for mental health. And on my book and on my website, I list some nonprofits and some organizations that run those sites. There are also 12-step meetings. Like if you have an addiction and need help, there's 12-step groups. I know those can be controversial, but I'm just saying they exist. And then there's parents helping parents websites for parenting. There's meetup.com for all sorts of interests. And I recommend just sort of exploring all those things and seeing if there's not some peer supported way you can talk to other people who are overwhelmed by the same thing you are. For me, sometimes mental health. And I'm also in a writers group that I just found online. I just searched peer support group for writers and found a group where we all meet together and we all write together in silence. It's great for introverts because we turn off our cameras and our mics and just write, but we're together. And then we come on for a little bit of organized talk for just 10 minutes. And then we turn the cameras back off and write for another 45, 50 minutes. And so there are lots of great resources out there that people probably just don't know about. And I'm trying to bring those to light and encourage people to go find them.
Yeah, and you have a lot of great resources in your book. So another thing I really liked is, sticking with the RIP current theme, you mentioned self-calming and self-improvement behaviors. Maybe while you're waiting to get rescued, is that how those go?
Yeah. So as I said, I really couldn't get out of my biggest, I call them overwhelm currents alone, like being stagnant in my career in, 2016, 2017. And so what I did is I started learning skills to improve myself and some skills to calm myself down while I waited, on the job application process. And, similarly, if you've got mental health challenges, you got to wait for the next therapist appointment or the, next peer support group meeting. So like, what do we do in the meantime? And the answer is you're not useless just because you need help. There's just things you can do that aren't fighting head on in a panicked way against your overwhelm. And so I think calming is really underrated. My therapist actually does a lot of somatic techniques with me, like techniques with your body itself, not your thoughts. And so I do some gentle rocking or swaying in a chair. And it's just kind of like nourishing your body and giving yourself care. And then I also take like really luxurious baths now. That's in the book. And I never took a bath for so many years because I was like, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy. I got to go check my work emails. And now I'll like set up a nice calming bath, and just soothing your body can really help decrease your stress, even if the mental problems haven't gone away. And so I really recommend that because, it's physical. It's just happening to you. But it's also good to find music you like or podcasts like this one, right? That are they're sort of self-improvement and sort of soothing, but it's much better than just being in a panic, or being in a spiral, which is why I think the work you're doing, David, and stuff like this is so important. And even just like guided meditation apps. I know I used to just scroll the news all the time when I was at work. I would scroll, the main news websites and look at every story when I was bored. And it was just causing me more panic, and it was kind of drowning me in all the world's problems. And instead I started doing meditation, with Headspace or Calm or one of those apps. And that really helped me. So I think just soothing yourself and admitting like, I can't fight this off on my own. I need to take some space is always great. And then when you're doing self-improvement, I say, don't do it with a perfectionist mindset, do it with a survival mindset. Like, I'm going to get this skill, but I'm going to keep asking for help so that I can use the skill. And so it's not that I'm useless or with help, I don't have to do anything. It's that just like swimmers in a rip current kind of are taught to swim out to the side, like out of the current, but not towards the beach. We can do the same thing by building skills, building home and work skills, learning more about our personalities. And then when we get the help and get the opportunities we're waiting for, we'll be primed for them. So that's kind of my take on those things.
Very nice. And that's the key, is understanding who you are, what you need, and that things don't need to be overwhelming, but finding the help that you need when they are. And then at the end, you call it life on the beach. Tell us about that.
Yeah, right. So it's like, I guess if I had a thesis for my book, it would be the problem is being overwhelmed. The solution is to get help, through my method or just any way of getting help. And then the result that you get that's so great is relief, the feeling of relief, and you get life at the beach. And I think of this not necessarily as like a lazy person sitting on the beach, just doing nothing. I'm ignoring everything. I think of it as you've been out there swimming your whole life. There's all this overwhelm, right? From a young age. I tell a story about a friend I know whose, 6-year-old child is getting overwhelmed by school. And so from such a young age, we are overwhelmed by a variety of things, And so we're always swimming, always panicking, always, stressed. And when we get those little moments of relief, like say after completing a big exam or after completing a big work deadline, or when your paycheck comes into your account and you have money, that relief feels so good, but it's so transient. It goes by so fast. And so life at the beach is the idea that, when we get enough help, we'll actually end up on solid ground. And it's not just about doing leisure all the time. It's about, oh my goodness, I can just stop and take a breath and exist and feel my emotions, and everything is going to be okay. And I think it's hard to picture that feeling until you've found a little taste of it, but it's just a matter of, continuing to get help and always just asking for more support and giving it to others too. And so to me, life at the beach is like your life's not perfect, but you have supporters and helpers to keep you out of the worst things. And you're slowly putting yourself in more safer, calmer situations. And then everyday life is just good. And I say in the book, nowadays, this is true, probably only in the past year or so, that when I put my head on the pillow at night, I actually can go to sleep and think, I don't have regrets today. And I think that's because little parts of me inside of me were always screaming, you need help. You need to get us out of this bad situation. We're too taxed. And because I've gotten so much help, those parts of me and my body are kind of like, oh, like life is good. We can relax a little bit. I think we all probably underestimate the amount of stress and anxiety we have, even though we know we have it. And so life on the beach is just a life with less of that. And it just feels great.
Oh, that's wonderful. And we all get way too overwhelmed. And your book on this is extremely helpful. And I get overwhelmed. And it really is, who am I? And in your case, my case, we're introverts and we have very unique gifts and strengths. This book is for introverts and extroverts. So the extrovert also needs to understand their gifts and their strengths and what they need. And a lot of times that is some time alone to use your gifts and strengths as an introvert, and just realizing that we're not perfect and nobody is, right?
Yeah.
And that there's help out there. There's other people out there that can help us. Woody, this has been a very helpful conversation. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we didn't so far?
I think we hit most of it. I mean, I think I'll just leave it with one more pitch, which is just, I have seen firsthand just the immense relief of asking for help. And so I know it's super scary. I know a lot of people listening are like, whoa, like you're talking about a peer support group or a therapist or what is all this? But at the end of the day, we're up against big obstacles in life. School and work aren't necessarily out to get us, but they're just huge systems. And so it is very stressful to be a part of that and have, stuff put on you. And so I just encourage everyone to give asking for help a try in whatever form works for you. It doesn't have to be my exact system or my book, but, I have done a lot of the work and really seen it work firsthand. And it's not that I'm perfect and it's not that I'm, super rich or successful or anything like that, right? That life can be good without those things. Life is good when you get relief from being overwhelmed. And I just think the feeling of relief is so great. I just recommend everybody at least give it a, try, like a little hello bite. But that's basically all I have to say.
All right. So the book is out, Help I'm Overwhelmed. Where can people find out more information about your book and about the work you're doing, Woody?
Sure. So the book is on Amazon. It's, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook format. So as long as my audiobook isn't having any issues, it should be up to. And so whatever mode you like, if you like listening, audiobook should be there for you. And then you can always visit me at helpimoverwhelmed.com. That's my main website. I do offer kind of a one-page worksheet that goes with the book you can get for free on my website, and also a list of the mental health resources I'm compiling. So I talk about these peer groups, right? And what are those? And even if you don't have the book, you can go to my website and there's a page, helpimoverwhelmed.com/resources. And that's where you can get those free resources. So no punctuation, just helpimoverwhelmed.com. I'm sure David will put that in a link somewhere in writing.
I will add all of this to the show notes.
Yeah, so. Awesome. But that's where you can find me. And on social media, Instagram, at Woody Rini, just my name.
Sounds great. And thank you. Again, we all need a lot less overwhelm in our lives. And thank you for being on today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts and links to social media channels. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code, and you can also have the option of purchasing the full report if you'd like to learn more. I'll add a link to the show notes. So many great things about being an introvert, and we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.